Hey folks, I'm JC, and this channel's all about running fantastic one-shot adventures and sometimes one-shot campaigns. Well, today I want to expand my thoughts a little bit on the Alien RPG's Draconis Strain campaign, a collection of 3 loosely connected adventures: Chariot of the Gods, Destroyer of Worlds, and Heart of Darkness. I've run each of these adventures at least 2 times now, and I've been thinking about the right order in which to run them, if you're going to run them all. But before I dive in, warning, there are some spoilers coming ahead, so this is all Game Masters only stuff. So if you're thinking about playing in these trilogy of sci-fi horror adventures, just back off slowly and go watch a different video before a xenomorph decides to hunt you down. Okay, so I'm gonna get right to it. The Draconis Strain trilogy has 3 parts to it, and I think they should actually be played in a completely different order than how they were published. Let me explain. In Chariot of the Gods, the PCs discover a derelict spacecraft, the Kronos, which has been floating in space for a few decades. They board the ship and discover that there's a few survivors frozen on board, and that those survivors set down on a planetoid where they were infected by these black motes. They created a 26 Draconis strain to cure the problem caused by the motes. That problem being that alien creatures grow inside of you and burst out of you at really inopportune times. However, the cure doesn't work right, and in fact turned some of those people given the drug into these bestial mutant abominations. So Chariot of the Gods is all about surviving aboard the Kronos as the mutations take hold of everyone. And importantly, as they explore that ship, they discover that one of the ship's EEVs, the Chariot, is missing. This comes into play later. Destroyer of Worlds picks up later, where the players now take on the roles of Marines stationed on a remote frozen moon. The Marines are trying to track down 4 AWOL Marines who were face-hugged in a secret lab hidden on the moon and infected, but they were all given the 26 Draconis strain to cure them, with mixed results. Some were cured, others still have chestbursters or other horrible aliens inside them. But the PCs have to survive an orbital bombardment and escape the moon, usually nuking the moon in the process. And this last part of Destroyer of Worlds is really exciting. The Marines have to fight their way through a xenomorph-infested base and even take out an alien queen in the process. Destroyer of Worlds is a little vague where that secret lab got the Draconis strain, but it's sort of implied that the Colonial Marines had found the Kronos before the players did in the last adventure and took a sample before the events of Chariot of the Gods. Then finally, in Heart of Darkness, a group of scientists is sent to the edge of a black hole, where the space station there, the Erebos, has gone haywire after pulling a meteor swarming with new life into its bay. The meteor, as it turns out, isn't a meteor at all. It's the lifeboat from the Kronos, the Chariot, and it's transformed into sort of a living organism. And the survivors on board, who were also given the 26 Draconis strain, have now evolved past the mutant abomination stage into a brand new life form, the terrifying, intelligent, and telepathic Wolfremen. While I have issues with the motivations of this species, they are bad news and they want to spread out all over the galaxy. And of course, they need the 26 Draconis strain to create more of their own. Heart of Darkness concludes with the PCs stopping the Wolfremen from escaping the black hole and, well, assuming they stay sane and survive through that whole adventure, but that's where the Draconis strain trilogy meets its end with the defeat of the Wolfremen. So as you can see, this trilogy is very loosely connected, with the 26 Draconis strain really being the one piece that holds it all together. And while it does work as presented, I don't think it works particularly great. Once you're done with Chariot of the Gods, you're left with a lot of mysteries, and they're really not answered in Destroyer of Worlds. Like, you want to find out what was the origin of the 26 Draconis strain, and what happened to the missing lifeboat. And Destroyer of Worlds just skips over most of those questions. And in fact, it presents more questions, some of which are never fully answered, like how did the Marines get hold of the 26 Draconis strain? Wasn't it all destroyed at the end of Chariot of the Gods? So these first two adventures don't really connect very neatly, and then Destroyer of Worlds finale is great and huge and action-packed, but as a result it doesn't feel like the middle part of a trilogy. It feels like the end. And when you roll into Heart of Darkness, the finale, yeah, you do finally get the missing lifeboat and the creation of the full Fremen as sort of a payoff to what was happening in Chariot of the Gods, but it feels a little late. And the full Fremen, well, they're very contained to this one space station, and they don't really do anything threatening in that adventure, at least not on the scale of a big finale. Instead, they just kind of show up and they get wiped out right away by the adventure's end. And so the trilogy ends on sort of an anticlimactic down note. Now yes, this is all structured like the Alien movies. Each of these episodes of this trilogy kind of takes the look and feel from its parallel in the original Alien movies, but we all know that those movies don't exactly end in a satisfying way either. So with all of that, I'm going to say that the Draconis Strain trilogy is put together in completely the wrong order. And kind of like the Machete order of the Star Wars movies, I'm going to show you how to rearrange these adventures in this series to make for a more narratively satisfying adventure, fill in some of those plot holes, and end with a bigger bang. Still start with Chariot of the Gods. I like that it presents the origin of the 26 Draconis strain, and I also like that it's a very constrained, creepy adventure that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a great beginning adventure for the Alien RPG. But then skip right to Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness expands on the scope of Chariot of the Gods and immediately answers Chariot of the Gods' main mystery. Where's the Chiron, the Kronos' missing lifeboat? And Heart of Darkness, while it is an overcomplicated, dark adventure, it still keeps the PCs in the roles of everyman scientists and explorers, but ups the tension when they discover that the 26 Draconis strain can actually create the full Fremen. I like that Heart of Darkness just gives you more immediate answers from Chariot of the Gods. But I make a few changes to Heart of Darkness. When the PCs arrive on the stations, I have one of the NPCs, like Warden Stikes, the guy who's kind of in charge of the station, casually mention that they had one or two other scientists at the station when they pulled the meteor in. But the black hole made those scientists sick, and they quickly left and abandoned the station afterwards. And then, if any of the players survive the mission and escape the black hole, end it with them getting a communication from a nearby colonial marine ship where they receive a message from a guy named Colonel Myers who's informing them that they are being rescued. So now what you've done is you've set up the conclusion, Destroyer of Worlds. One of those scientists that Stikes talked about on board Erebos turns out to be Ms. Eckford. She works for Weyland-Yutani. And the PC's rescuer was Colonel Myers, and both of these people end up working together in that secret lab on the frozen moon in Destroyer of Worlds to recreate the 26 Draconis strain. Both these two people will now have context from the previous adventure. And now your players will know the consequences of that strain. It can create the full Fremen. So now in Destroyer of Worlds, the players are playing as badass Marines. They're tracking down those soldiers who Eckford and Myers have given the Draconis strain to. And then you can tweak their plan. They're actually planning on using the Draconis strain on the remaining colonists. They have nothing to lose. It's about to get invaded. They think they can do a mass inoculation of those colonists. They're test subjects, sort of like the US military used to do in the 1950s. They'll just give everybody that and see what happens. Of course, they think this is just a big test, but in reality, they're about to accidentally create hundreds of full Fremen. And maybe this is why the UPP launches that attack in full force on a planet that is otherwise pretty useless. Or why the engineers suddenly show up and bombard the heck out of the moon with black goo. They want to take out the moon before some stupid humans create a race of intelligent, telepathic monsters. The Marines won't know the full extent of this plan, but your players will, elevating the stakes even higher. And then that ragtag bunch of Marines can save mankind in an explosive action-packed finale, which will likely end up with the entire moon getting nuked. So what do you think? I think that reordering these adventures narratively makes more sense and ends the Draconis Strain trilogy with an action-packed, explosive finale. But hey, I'll admit that this is how I accidentally played this campaign. I swapped the order of Heart of Darkness and Destroyer of Worlds just because I wanted to play the newer campaign first. So maybe this all works best for me, and you all prefer the intended order. But let me know in the comments below, especially if you've GM'd or played in all 3 of these adventures. If you've enjoyed all my reviews and tips on these alien adventures, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel because I'll probably be back for more. Until next time, I'm JC. Have fun enjoying all the horrors of the alien universe.